Guild members, officers and immense ogres of the committee. My name is Jeremy Finkelstein, but most of you will know me as my in-game name, Foes. I've been tasked to develop an inclusion audit of our World of Warcraft community organisation, Purveyors of Fine Meats. I address this audit to you, the officers that represent our Guild's leadership team. We may all be from different parts of Australia behind the computer screen, with different backgrounds and at different stages of life, but when it comes to our Guild, I know we all have the same positive intentions. I've been a member of our Guild for well over a year now, and I know we've had some great memories, from last-second boss kills to massive Guild fun runs and scavenger hunts. Here. And as a Guild, we've already spent a lot of time planning on how to be a more inclusive community already. Through the planning efforts of our officers here today, I am pleased to report that many of our players interviewed as part of this audit have felt more part of our community than they had in previous Guilds. And what is perhaps most impressive of all is the fact that this community organisation is 100% constituted and managed by volunteers. There is, and never has been, any money involved or funding provided. Every player pays for their own computers and game subscriptions, and every Guild in-person meetup is entirely self-funded. It is worth noting, therefore, that this will likely place a limit on the success of some of the recommendations included as part of this audit. All things considered, you have all been doing a great job, but there's still more we can do as a community to truly include everybody, regardless of who they are behind the computer screen. Disability and inclusion. Disability is more common than many of us may think or realise. According to the World Health Organization, everybody on the planet is likely to experience disability at some point in their lives, either directly or through family. There are currently more than 1 billion people with disability globally. And because disability is a broad term, there are many different forms of disability, and it can mean so much more than simply being in a wheelchair. For those with a disability, there are often significant hurdles when it comes to participating in community organisations, as McCausland et al. Found in their 2021 study. Think of a tennis club or a theatre group, for example. Both activities require significant physical and social capacity in order to fully participate as part of the group. And that's what inclusion is all about. As Chenet 2019 explains, inclusion is the process of improving the participation of individuals and groups in society and improving the ability, opportunity, and dignity of those disadvantaged on the basis of their identity. Chenet goes on to explain that inclusion should be considered more as an outlook, as a way of thinking rather than just as a process. How we consider those around us, how we socialise equally with the entire community. Once someone experiences a true sense of belonging, acceptance, and value within that society, they are more likely to feel happier and healthier than those who don't. It's this feeling of inclusion or belonging that many people may take for granted, or think of as a passive part of their life. But as McCausland et al. Found, people with intellectual disability are more often excluded from a range of social measures, including relationships and community participation. This has been further compounded by the ongoing COVID-19 lockdowns in Melbourne and Sydney in particular. These lockdowns have led to a significantly negative impact on the ability of people with disabilities to be able to participate within the community. Fortunately for the living and occasionally undead members of our Guild, we have the opportunity to level the playing field. As Owar et al. In 2017 suggested, assistive technology like World of Warcraft can help players feel included within a community organisation. We can do better to help our fellow players, and with this audit, we will do better. We still have some barriers of inclusion left to defeat, but over the years we've become pretty good at defeating our foes. It's what we at Purveyors of Fine Meats do best. Discussing frameworks. As part of this presentation, it is important for us to consider some of the formal backstory to this all-important audit story. So let's jump into what our obligations as a community are under the United Nations Convention on the Rights of People with Disability, or CRPD for short. The CRPD, adopted in 2006, is perhaps one of the most influential human rights treaties over the past century, as it represents a complete shift from the medical model of disability and instead emphasises the social model of disability. But more on that shortly. Importantly though, the CRPD is Australia's obligation to ensure that people with disabilities are truly considered as equal members of mainstream society. There are many different articles within the CRPD, and you can think of an article as a specific topic that covers an area of society. Article 9 is titled Accessibility, and is one of the articles that is particularly focused around inclusion. Article 9 requires organisations, including private entities, to offer services that are disability accessible and with staff that have received disability awareness training on the barriers faced by people with disabilities to be able to access their services. I mentioned the social model of disability about 30 seconds ago, but why does it matter and what does it even mean? The social model can best be described by first defining the medical model, as the social model is a direct response to that now outdated framework. The medical model framed disability as an individual impairment that can be suppressed or cured, often under the authority of the medical profession. The medical model resulted in widespread institutionalization of people with disabilities, usually against their will. The social model, however, presents us with a different view of disability, one which argues that disability is only an impairment when there are environmental and societal barriers present within the community. The social model has helped return the respect and dignity that people with disabilities lost as a result of the medical model.
Opportunity, and we give it back to you, the people.
The growing adoption of the social model has led to increased use of assistive technology and individualised support, which has helped people with disability gain autonomy over their own lives. With some of that vital context covered, it's time to discuss the findings of the audit itself. Audit findings. In order to structure this audit, I've chosen an inclusion framework developed by Milner and Kelly in 2009. Their framework, which discusses the importance of 5 geographies of belonging, highlights a number of key criteria that an organisation needs to meet in order to become an inclusive community and a safe social space. These geographies of belonging are categorised as self-determination, social identity, reciprocity and valued contribution, participatory expectations, and psychological safety. Before we begin with a discussion around the first geography of belonging, I wanted to note that when it comes to participatory expectations, for the majority of purveyors, players will be accepted and can feel completely validated as a casual player, regardless of their skill level. During the player interviews that I conducted, it became clear that the Guild is sufficiently meeting this need. However, when it comes to the competitive side of the Guild, participatory expectations as a barrier will be unavoidable, as the Guild expects all competitive players to have a certain level of skill. During these activities, there is very little time or resources available to accommodate underperforming players. As such, I do not feel that I can make any recommendations that could have a meaningful impact on the community with regards to improving participatory expectations. Let's move on to a discussion around self-determination. Self-determination. According to Milner and Kelly, self-determination is about ensuring that individuals can actively and autonomously participate in self-chosen activities in a way that lets the individual make their own decisions about how they wish to interact with the community. Guild performance. During this audit, I found that self-determination acted as both an enabler and as a barrier depending on the context. As an enabler, all players, when starting to play the game, are given the opportunity to completely determine who they are and what they look like. As Kath et al. Point out, the game medium, in this case World of Warcraft, should be considered as an assistive technology because it enables players to remove the physical barriers of the real world by choosing a game path without the consideration of constraints. As one of our guild members expressed in an interview, "It's my desire to be a full, competitive member of the team, and I can do so without difficulty, which isn't the case if I wanted to play a game of cricket with those same guys." And as a barrier, games like World of Warcraft are particularly popular for online gaming communities as they are such massive games that players are given significantly more freedom than they might have in other game genres. However, there are still limitations of choice when it comes to the competitive aspects of the game. This is because it is expected that a player who wants to play competitively will adhere to mainstream strategy and standards for their role. Audit recommendation. In order to address this barrier, this audit recommends the adoption of a supported mentoring program, which would encourage the hiring of well-respected gamers to become sessional support workers as part of a participant's NDIS funding. With appropriate support and role modelling for more experienced gamers, players with a disability will be able to effectively weigh up their self-determined decisions in order to ensure they are getting exactly what they want out of the game and the guild. Social identity. Milner and Kelly define social identity as the development of familiarity within a space. They introduced Louise as an exemplar of social identity, as she was a participant who was well known at all the local shops in her community. Despite only seldom visiting those shops throughout the week, their familiarity with Louise made her feel like she had a strong social identity within that community. Guild performance. As a player within the guild, we've all been given the opportunity to determine our entire online identity. Every player can literally create their own social identity within this online space. For the members of Purveyors of Fine Meats, social identity enables community inclusion. As an enabler, through the use of a highly active Discord server and through regular social events, this audit found that Purveyors is a guild that encourages and champions social identity more than many other online community organisations. Purveyors has developed a positive social identity of its own at the organisational level. This means that most players on the server respect Purveyors members, which allows players to feel like they can be positive role models in the wider community. Another enabler is the leadership team itself. These officers, chaired by Bolts, aka Logan, are proactive when it comes to organising group activities and events which are welcome to all players of the guild, whether or not they are competitive or casual members. Audit recommendation. As per Kath et al.'s 2019 study of World of Warcraft players, she found that participants who were not judged by their disability and were instead judged by their in-game personality and participation were more likely to feel comfortable and familiar within the game space. To further encourage and promote the respect and identity of players within the guild, this audit recommends the use of community polls, surveys, and the inclusion of group discussion or fireside chats. By including a range of members in this open forum, rather than just the officer team, players will feel more appreciated and new ideas for inclusion can flourish. Reciprocity and valued contribution. Reciprocity and valued contribution describes the process whereby players are able to add value to the lives of other players in ways that would be appreciated by all parties. It's a form of inclusion, as a player is given the ability to feel needed and useful to the organisation and community as a whole. Guild performance. This geography of place should be considered as both an enabler and a barrier for purveyors of fine meats. As an enabler, Boylstorff's 2018 study noted that people with disabilities in online gaming communities can gain a sense of selfhood characterized by creativity and contribution. In purveyors, this is often shown when a new player starts to feel more included within the guild, once they've started to be able to offer a unique service to the player base. As a barrier, similar to many large organisations, it can become very easy for individual members to slip through the cracks and be ignored by the majority of the community. If a player starts to perform less competitively compared to the rest of the guild standard, then they are more likely to become excluded from the team, or at least feel like they are a burden to the guild. Audit recommendation. Based on the recommendation by Fisher et al. In 2019, this audit proposes the introduction of a peer-to-peer mentoring program in order to promote building intrinsic motivation and personal growth opportunities for guild members. This service would be open to the entire community in order to reduce the focus on a particular player's disability or lack thereof. This recommendation comes back to reciprocity and valued contribution in a unique way, as players that request peer mentoring will be given the opportunity to not only improve their own gameplay, but by doing so, they will be able to directly improve the performance of the entire guild. Psychological safety. Psychological safety refers to an atmosphere of trust, confidence, and camaraderie that is fostered within a community space that is welcoming for all people, particularly for minorities and for those with a disability. However, when members of a community are made to feel socially othered, this can diminish the group's sense of psychological safety. Guild performance. During this audit, I found that psychological safety is often a barrier for people with disabilities that can significantly prevent them from feeling included within the organisation. As a barrier, when players are relying on their own digitally created identity, no one will know who is truly behind the computer screen. As a result, the use of inappropriate, discriminatory, and ableist languages become a lot more frequent. Unfortunately, this puts the obligation for behavioural management onto the shoulders of the officers. Officers whose capacity is often already limited by other obligations within the guild. This is even further compounded by the fact that they themselves are volunteers within the guild, who do not always want to spend their leisure time resolving disputes and instances of inappropriate behaviour. Audit recommendation. This audit recommends a two-pronged approach to encouraging a sense of psychological safety within the guild and the broader World of Warcraft community. Firstly, a communication toolkit would help purveyors create guidelines around inclusive language. This is aligned with the principles of Article 9 from the CRPD. As part of the communication toolkit, the officers could create a communication board for each enemy encounter as part of the guild's preparation strategy for new competitive content. Secondly, purveyors should take a leaf out of Scope's Communication Access for All document from 2015 by considering the drafting of new internal policies which state the guild's firm commitment and support for people with disabilities. This would include an update to the guild's recruitment practices, with these policies being made readily available to all guild members via the Discord server. Conclusion. There are many enablers and barriers to inclusion for people with disabilities when it comes to being a member of Purveyors of Fine Meats. Our guild does a lot to foster the geography's place, as mentioned by Milner and Kelly. However, this audit has elucidated a number of ways in which we as a community can still improve when it comes to inclusion for all of our players. Taken together, this audit has made recommendations regarding the adoption of supported peer-to-peer mentoring, the promotion of open fireside discussions, and a new communication toolkit. All of these recommendations will help create a guild that can defeat more than mere dragons, and become one that can topple the black gates that have annexed the lush fields of disability, inclusion, and respect for far too long.